You never thought the earth beneath your feet could turn against you so fast, but imagine waking to the thunderous roar of a flash flood racing down a rocky gorge, turning your world upside down in minutes. There's no warning, no time to run. How did the earliest humans survive when nature unleashed its most brutal fury? What desperate measures did they dig into the ground, clawing for shelter and safety? The answer isn't just about survival, it's about ingenuity, instinct, and the buried secrets of a forgotten world. You're about to uncover what cavemen actually dug to outwit the deadliest floods known to humankind. But beware, some truths are buried deep, beneath layers of earth and time, waiting to be uncovered. Can you handle what's hidden beneath the surface? You stand on open ground, barefoot on warm dust. The sun stares down without mercy. You've walked for hours across a plain that seems solid, still safe. But safety here is an illusion. Because what's coming doesn't move like a predator. It doesn't announce itself with a growl or rustle of grass. It doesn't stalk you. It falls, all at once. From the sky you can't see. From hills you didn't climb. From clouds that don't belong to your horizon. And when it comes, it doesn't look like death at first. Just a ripple, just water. But within seconds, the ground you trusted will become a river. That river will rise into a wall. That wall will carry trees, stone, bones. And it won't stop, not for you, not for your fire, not for your shelter, not for the child sleeping 2 feet away. This is a flash flood, and you've just entered its territory. You don't know it yet, not really, but water is your most unpredictable enemy, not the lack of it. The sudden, uninvited arrival of too much. These floods aren't part of your weather, they belong to the land itself. Rain falls far away, sometimes 20 kilometers upstream. The sky above you might stay cloudless, but deep channels carved by ancient storms wait patiently. Invisible scars, traps, all they need is one storm. Then they wake. You were never taught this. There is no language yet for flash flood, but the lesson is already written in your bones. You've heard the stories, told not with words but with the tremble in a parent's voice, the way a fire goes quiet when someone mentions a certain canyon. You've passed places where nothing grows, places where the air is heavy with something that isn't just moisture, it's memory. You're starting to notice the patterns. A dry streambed that seems too wide, driftwood wedged between rocks 15 feet high, stones polished too smooth, the sudden disappearance of a trail used just last season. These are signs, not obvious, but to stay alive, you begin to read them. Because if you can't read the land will erase you. You wonder how many before you failed. How many families set up camp in the wrong depression? How many children never made it out of that low valley? You wonder what it feels like to hear a roar that doesn't belong, to turn and see a wall of water thundering toward you, carrying entire trees like branches, splintering the air. You can imagine the mud climbing over your knees, pulling, suffocating, swallowing even the loudest screams. There are no second chances when the water comes. And so you start choosing differently. You avoid the greenest grass, it grows too well where water once rushed. You climb higher to sleep, even if it means colder winds. You keep tools nearby, never buried too deep. Your children sleep close enough to grab in an instant. And still, that might not be enough. Because the flood doesn't come in hours, it comes in minutes. sometimes less. The danger isn't new. Flash floods have haunted the earth for millions of years, but now they haunt you because you are a creature of the land now. You stay longer in one place. You dig. You build windbreaks. You stockpile roots, bones, flint. You need predictability. And the flood hates predictability. It rewrites the land while you're still standing on it. That ridge you climbed last week might be gone. That shelter beneath the rock overhang, filled with silt, your footsteps erased like they never happened. You begin to see the irony. Water, the source of life, becomes your executioner. You cannot fight it. You cannot outrun it. All you can do is read the earth better than your ancestors did. Learn its secrets before they kill you. But the question starts to linger. How? How did your ancestors first begin to notice? They must have watched animals, birds fleeing downstream, insects rising from the soil, a strange silence before the noise. Or perhaps it was instinct, the kind that doesn't come from logic but from generations of terror buried in the bloodstream. Some began to dig, not just for water but for safety. And that changed everything. Because once you put your hands in the earth not just to harvest, but to hide, a new kind of survival began. You wonder about that first moment, the first time someone scraped away at the dirt, not for food, not for fire-starting roots, but to survive a flood. What made them do it? Did they see the water coming? Did they have seconds to choose? Did they claw the earth out with bare hands, or had they prepared something, a cavity, a tunnel, a hollow beneath the stone? And when they crawled into that dark place, did they know they were rewriting the rules? Survival no longer meant just chasing animals and escaping predators. Now it meant shaping the land to serve you, bending earth and shelter to your will. The flood was a killer, but it was also a teacher. Its lessons were brutal, and they never stopped coming. Entire campsites were swallowed. Archaeologists today find layers of flood debris, buried hearths, crushed bones, tools snapped under rockfall. The water came with such force that even the densest shelters, the most carefully chosen camps, couldn't withstand it. But that destruction left evidence, and it left clues. Sediment patterns, fossilized wood, the odd angles of stones, all speak of how often this happened. And what survived? The shelters that endured weren't just lucky, they were deliberate. High ground, dug-in walls, fire pits nestled above the waterline. These weren't just survival choices. They were architectural blueprints made in desperation. You can feel it now, the tension between trust and terror. Every time you settle, you wonder, will this place hold? Will the riverbed stay dry? Or will this be the night when the walls collapse and the black water rises? Even sleep becomes a risk. So you stay light, you watch the sky. And when the wind shifts, when the soil smells too damp, when birds take flight all at once, you're already moving. Because you've learned what it means to live in flood country. Not just to survive, but to anticipate, to adapt. And every instinct you sharpen now, every choice you make under that silent sun, shapes what the people after you will remember. Floods didn't just threaten your ancestors. They trained them. They taught early humans where not to build, where not to hunt, when to listen instead of act, and how to treat the land as a living, breathing force, one that could end you or save you depending on how closely you paid attention. And beneath that terror, a quiet transformation had already begun. Because once you've learned to see water as a destroyer, you start searching for a counterforce, something deeper than instinct, something physical, permanent, reliable. The answer wasn't fire, it was earth. And what happened next would reshape the human relationship with the land forever. But before that story begins, ask yourself this. If you lived in flood country, how would you know where it was safe to sleep? And if you couldn't trust the sky, would you trust the ground? You've always known the feeling, the primal urge to duck, to hide, to take cover when danger pulses on the horizon. For most animals, shelter is found, not made, but you dig. And that changes everything. You've seen caves before, wide mouths carved by nature, safe, shadowy hollows where bears sleep and echoes play tricks on the mind. But caves are rare, precious, often occupied, and in the age before ownership, competition for them meant blood. So you begin to ask, what if shelter didn't have to be stumbled upon? What if it could be made? That idea, absurd at first, becomes an instinct, and soon your hands begin to claw at the dirt. Not for food, not for fire fuel, for safety. And in that moment, the human story turns. You crouch low, scooping cold earth with bare hands. It resists you. Roots tangle around your fingers. Stones cut your palms. The soil is damp, not wet enough to flood, but close. Every handful is a wager. You don't know how deep you need to go. You don't know how much time you have before the skis shift, before the distant roar becomes local and lethal. But you keep digging. Because this isn't about comfort, it's about survival. You've watched floods sweep through your world. You've seen what they leave behind: snapped bones, crushed campsites, the skeletal remains of animals too slow to flee. Water doesn't just drown, it buries, smothers, destroys. So you dig because the ground is the only place left to run into. And at first it's rudimentary, a shallow depression, a trench along a slope, maybe a hollow beneath an overhanging boulder. You learn to read the land, to feel the difference between loose, treacherous sand and dense clay that holds its shape. Your fingers become sensors. Your tools are bones, sticks, flat stones sharpened through trial and necessity. There's no blueprint, just urgency. And the tension is unbearable. Every moment spent digging is a moment not spent watching the sky. Every second your back is turned to the weather is a gamble. If the water comes early, you die with your shelter half-formed, swallowed in your own desperation. But if you finish in time, if you carve deep enough, with just the right angle to funnel runoff away, if you brace the entrance with the right stones, if you seal the cracks with grasses and ash, if you hollow out a space small enough to stay hidden, but high enough to avoid rising ground seepage, then you live. And suddenly, digging isn't just an act. It's a ritual. It's knowledge. It's inheritance. You teach others, they teach their children. The skills sharpen with each passing generation. People begin carrying tools designed not for hunting but for burrowing. Stone picks, weighted scrapers, awls for loosening packed mud. This is no longer a response to disaster. It's preparation for it. The first true shelters weren't homes. They were lifeboats carved in silence, beneath the looming threat of a sky that could kill. You imagine them now, shallow earth bunkers hidden in hillsides, entrances camouflaged with reeds and stone, air vents disguised by branches, fire pits dug deep and low so the light wouldn't give you away to animals, to enemies, or to the storm gods above. And this too changes you. Because now the earth isn't just terrain, it's technology. You begin to notice which soils drain better, which ones collapse. You learn to dig not where it's easiest, but where it's safest. Over time, your people stop waiting for the flood season to begin digging. They do it before the rains come, just in case. Shelters become pre-built sanctuaries. And with that foresight, humanity gains its first real weapon against the flood. Not escape, but endurance. But it's not without cost. Digging too deep can bring collapse. Bracing walls requires time and materials not always nearby. A shelter dug in haste can become a tomb. If the rain comes while you're still inside, if you misjudge the slope, or fail to vent the pressure, water can fill your hiding place faster than you can crawl out. You've heard the stories, maybe even found the evidence. Bodies curled inside half-dug chambers, stone tools buried with no signs of escape, a mother clutching a child, both fossilized beneath compacted sediment. The line between refuge and grave was heartbreakingly thin. So you learn balance. You dig smarter. You work in pairs. One digs, one watches the sky. You time it right. And with every season, the shelters grow more sophisticated. Sloped ceilings, drainage channels, internal ledges to sleep above the rising moisture line. This is early engineering, born not from curiosity but necessity. Archaeologists today find these remnants, though they often miss what they're truly seeing. Shallow pits, soil discolorations, odd arrangements of stones. They look like random holes. But they're not random. They were survival capsules. And when you crouched inside one during the first real flood, hearing the roar pass over you, the pounding above, the rush of water clawing at the entrance, you knew. This wasn't just shelter. It was proof. Proof that you could fight back, not with strength, but with foresight, with dirt under your nails and wisdom in your hands. And yet the tension never left. Because every flood was different. Every year the land changed. What once was safe could now be a trap. Entire families relocated based on rumors of a new river path, a new basin forming upstream, a strange silence in the bird calls. Shelters had to move. They had to evolve. And so you did something even more radical. You started mapping. Not on paper, not yet, but in memory, in story, in song. You remembered where the soil betrayed you, where the walls held. You marked the stones with scratches, symbols, buried items. You turned your surroundings into a living archive of survival. And the land began to speak back. It told you where not to dig, where water pooled too long, where predators prowled, where floods had claimed others. And you listened. Because you learned. The flood didn't hate you. It didn't hunt you. But it didn't care whether you lived or died. So you built shelters that did. And you began to wonder what else could be shaped. If you could make the land hold back water, could you also make it trap warmth, catch wind, protect a fire? You didn't know it yet, but that first act of digging, born from terror, was the first blueprint of civilization. But before you could build societies, you had to survive the storm. And even now, even with smarter tools and shared knowledge, each flood season was a test. You could dig, you could plan, but nature was always louder. And so you stayed close to the earth, close to the tools, close to the exits, because safety wasn't a place. It was a process, and you were still learning. So tell me, if you had one day to dig your shelter, would you dig deeper or run farther? Would you trust the ground beneath you or gamble on the open sky? You step carefully into the trenches of modern archaeology, feeling the cool bite of the earth beneath your fingertips. The air carries a dry, dusty scent, a blend of soil, sweat, and centuries pressing down invisibly around you. Each handful of dirt you lift holds more than mere earth. It carries stories buried beneath layers of sediment, sediment laid down by floods that once roared with unstoppable fury. These floods didn't just reshape the land, they reshaped human lives, swallowing entire settlements in moments. And now, it's your job to find the fragile traces of those lives before time buries them forever. You peer closer at the layers of soil exposed in the trench walls, strata of clay, silt, sand, and gravel, each a frozen moment in time. Some layers are thin, barely noticeable, while others are thick and compacted, evidence of catastrophic floods that rip through the landscape, drowning homes and hopes alike. But these layers also preserve a paradox. While they erased much of what existed above, they shielded what remained beneath from the ravages of wind and sun, trapping it in a tomb of mud. You notice a cluster of tiny fragments poking out of the soil, shards of pottery, their edges worn smooth by centuries of pressure. These shards aren't just broken pieces of clay. They are clues. You imagine hands, long vanished, shaping vessels to store water or cook food. The curved lines hint at design, maybe even artistry, but above all, utility. These pots were lifelines, carried to new shelters hastily dug into the earth as floodwaters approached. Nearby, a stone tool glints faintly in the dust, a sharp flint blade chipped from a larger rock. It's worn down from use, the edges dulled but still deadly sharp. You can almost hear the scrape of it against wood or bone, the rhythm of a life lived in constant preparation. The tool speaks of desperate hands that carved out shelter, hunted game, and fought to keep the flood at bay. But evidence like this is rare, scattered, and fragile. Floodwaters are ruthless archivists. They wash away the obvious, carry objects far from their origin, and layer everything haphazardly. You learn quickly that the absence of artifacts can be as telling as their presence. Sometimes, whole villages are hidden beneath meters of sediment, invisible to the naked eye. Other times, what was once a bustling refuge becomes little more than a shadow in the soil, erased by the very force it was built to withstand. So how do archaeologists like you piece together the past from such fragmented puzzles? You lean in closer to a mound of compacted earth and study the soil's texture and composition. This is sedimentology, reading the story written in layers of earth. Fine silts might mean slow-moving water settling quietly over days. Coarser gravel and debris tell of violent floods, walls of water rushing at terrifying speed. Subtle disruptions, soil pushed aside or mixed, reveal the frantic digging of shelter entrances or hurried escapes. Fossilized remains add another layer of insight. You find fragments of charred wood, pollen grains trapped in mud, even tiny animal bones. Each speaks of the environment your ancestors faced, the plants they ate, the animals they hunted, the climate that ruled their days and nights. Sometimes, you uncover the remains of humans themselves, trapped in the flood's final grasp. These discoveries are heart-wrenching reminders of the stakes involved, that survival was never guaranteed, that nature's power was indifferent to human struggle. But the Earth doesn't give up its secrets easily. Time erodes, weather exposes, and modern development threatens to destroy. You're in a race against both nature and progress, racing to salvage history before it's lost beneath new layers of concrete and steel, or washed away by the next flood. Yet, even in this struggle, the traces you find tell a story of remarkable ingenuity. You uncover evidence of shelters carefully dug into hillsides, their entrances shaped to direct floodwaters away. You spot tiny channels etched into the soil, a primitive drainage systems designed to divert the worst of the water's wrath. It's engineering born of necessity, encoded in earth and stone long before written language. And then there are the signs of community, clusters of artifacts arranged not randomly, but deliberately. Pottery fragments grouped near hearths, tools stacked neatly as if ready for use. These arrangements hint at shared knowledge and cooperation, the first glimmers of social structures built around survival strategies. Your mind races with questions. How much did these early people understand about their environment? Did they pass down stories of past floods, warning future generations? Could some of these shelters have been occupied for years, refined over time as techniques improved? Archaeologists have begun to answer these questions by combining traditional digging with cutting-edge technology. Ground-penetrating radar reveals anomalies beneath the soil without disturbing the fragile ground. Chemical analysis detects traces of human activity, burned remains, food residues, or organic materials. Even DNA recovered from ancient bones can hint at health, diet, and migration patterns. Each discovery is a piece of the larger mosaic, reconstructing a world lost to floodwaters. But the gaps remain wide, and you know that much may never be found. Some stories have been washed away forever. And still, the greatest challenge isn't just finding the artifacts. It's interpreting them without imposing modern assumptions. Early humans didn't think in the ways we do today. Their motivations, fears, and hopes were entwined with the unpredictable rhythms of their environment. You have to imagine their world not as a static museum, but as a living, breathing landscape, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. You feel the weight of this responsibility as you gently brush away the last layer of sediment from a half-buried stone slab. The patterns etched on its surface are faint, worn by time. Could this be a marker, a symbol, or simply a natural formation? The uncertainty is both frustrating and exhilarating. Every artifact you uncover has a story, but you must piece together the narrative with care. And then you step back, looking over the trench, and realize something profound. The floodwaters that once threatened to erase these lives have, paradoxically, preserved them. Without the sediment's careful layering, much of this past would have been lost to erosion, scavengers, or the passage of time. It's a bitter irony. The force that killed also saved. You reach down and touch the soil again, feeling its gritty coolness. This earth holds memories of fear, resilience, and adaptation. You are not just uncovering history. You are reconnecting with a human impulse as old as survival itself. To learn from the past, to build shelter against the unknown, and to endure. If you were standing here millennia ago, digging your own shelter just before the floodwaters rose, would you be able to look beneath the surface and see the patterns of the land? Could you read the signs others have missed? And if you could, what choices would you make? As you close the trench, a quiet thought lingers. Beneath layers of mud and memory, the earth still holds its secrets. Some buried stories wait patiently for curious hands to find them. Others may never emerge. But in the race against time and tide, every shard, every footprint, every faint disturbance brings you closer to understanding how your ancestors fought to survive in a world ruled by sudden, devastating floods. And that knowledge might just help you face the storms of your own time. If you were there, would you keep digging for answers, or let the earth keep its secrets? What lost knowledge do you think is still waiting beneath the mud? You stand at the edge of a vast valley, the sky above you shifting in color as dark clouds roll in. The air thickens, the wind whispers warnings you barely notice. But beneath this quiet tension, the earth is already pulsing, a hidden rhythm that tells a story far older than human memory. You can almost feel it, a subtle beating like a heart preparing to race. This is the beginning of the flood pulse, the invisible, deadly cadence that prehistoric people had to sense, understand, and survive. Flash floods are nature's sudden fury, but they are far more than random explosions of water and mud. They follow patterns, rules written in the landscape itself, rhythms in the weather and earth that, if you knew how to listen, could save your life. You start to realize that surviving these floods wasn't just about running or hiding. It was about reading the pulse of the planet, seeing signs invisible to the untrained eye. The first drops fall, but the danger is not in this gentle rain. It's in what you cannot see yet miles upstream. Clouds gathering, valleys swelling with rainwater, soil loosening under the onslaught. The flood begins not at your feet, but far away, where the land is steep and unforgiving. The water that will roar past you is already on its way, growing in strength and volume, obeying the law of gravity and the contours of the earth. You feel the ground beneath you vibrate faintly. It's the distant thunder of a torrent racing through narrow canyons, unseen but undeniable. Could ancient humans have felt these subtle tremors too? Their survival depended on it. Perhaps they learned to sense the faintest shifts in the air, the smell of ozone before the storm, the distant roar that meant the earth was moving in dangerous ways. You imagine a prehistoric hunter paused in the valley, watching clouds gather and shift. His eyes scan the hills for dark streaks where water might surge, his ears tuned to the change in wind and sound. Every instinct screams caution, but he can't afford to flee without reason. He must know when the danger will arrive, because flash floods come without warning, faster than any other natural disaster. The flood pulse follows the contours of the landscape, accelerating in narrow ravines, pooling in flat basins, carving new channels as it races toward lower ground. You realize the flood is not just a force of destruction. It's a message written in water and stone, a language the land speaks in rushing torrents and shifting soil. You recall studies showing how indigenous cultures worldwide developed sophisticated flood warnings based on nature's signs. Changes in bird behavior, animal restlessness, the scent of wet earth before rain. Could your ancestors have had a similar attunement, a deep connection to the environment that allowed them to predict floods hours before they arrived? Modern science reveals that flash floods develop within minutes to hours of heavy rainfall, especially in regions where soil can't absorb water fast enough. You understand how steep slopes funnel rain into narrow channels, amplifying the water's speed and power. But it's the subtlety, the moments before the flood, that matters most. You feel your heartbeat quicken as the sky darkens. There is a warning in the wind, a crescendo building unseen. Your mind races. How would you recognize the signs? Could you decipher the flood pulse before the water turned your world upside down? The answer lies in an ancient dance between human perception and natural signals. Survival wasn't just brute force or luck. It was understanding, anticipation, and respect for the land's power. You sense a shift in the air, a distant roar growing closer. It's the flood arriving, a violent surge that will reshape the valley, bury evidence, and rewrite the map of survival once again. And yet, amid the chaos, you glimpse a deeper truth. The flood pulse is not just destruction, but a rhythm of life, a challenge to adapt, to learn, to endure. If you stood here then, would you trust your senses to hear the flood before it swallowed you whole? Would you be able to read the pulse of the earth and survive the storm that follows? The flood's roar is no longer distant, it's rushing toward you. The land trembles. Your time to act is now. If this deepened your understanding of nature's hidden rhythms, subscribe to continue the journey through ancient survival. What signs would you watch for if your life depended on the flood pulse? You press your fingers against the rough edge of a stone tool, feeling the coarse texture worn smooth by millennia of use. This is no ordinary rock. It's a lifeline shaped by hands desperate to carve shelter from the unforgiving earth. You can almost hear the faint echoes of that ancient urgency, the rhythm of frantic digging as floodwaters approached, a race against time written in every chip and scrape. These tools were more than just instruments. They were extensions of survival instinct, crafted with precision born from necessity. Long before metal or complex machinery, your ancestors faced a brutal challenge: how to dig fast, deep, and effective enough to create safe havens against sudden floods. Their solution was a profound blend of observation, experimentation, and innovation. Every tool you hold today reveals a story of trial and error, shaped by the unforgiving landscape and the urgent need to protect life itself. You wonder what materials they chose and why. Stones, naturally abundant, became the foundation. But not just any stones. Only those with the right hardness and fracture patterns could be transformed into sharp-edged scrapers or sturdy digging implements. Flint, chert, and obsidian were prized for their ability to flake predictably, producing razor-sharp edges that cut through roots and soil with surprising efficiency. Bones, too, found new purpose. Long bones from animals were stripped of flesh and fashioned into digging picks or chisels. Their natural curvature and strength made them ideal for scraping and levering soil, especially in rocky or compacted ground. You feel the weight of one such tool, smooth, slightly curved, worn where fingers once gripped tightly, the tip chipped from countless strikes against stubborn earth. The ingenuity didn't stop at mere choice of materials. Toolmakers refined shapes and sizes to match the demands of quick excavation. Smaller, pointed tools were used for precision work, digging narrow entrance tunnels or loosening compact soil, while larger, flat implements helped scoop and throw dirt aside rapidly. You imagine hands working under the fading light, the urgency of each movement heightened by the threat of rising water. You also sense that these tools carried a social dimension. Crafting them required skill, knowledge passed down through generations. The best tool makers were invaluable, their creations literally shaping life and death outcomes. You picture a community where young hunters and diggers learned from elders, absorbing techniques to outpace the flood's deadly advance. Every scrape and chip on these tools echoes a deeper story, one of desperation and creativity intertwined. As floodwaters rose unpredictably, there was no time for perfection, only for what worked. You can almost feel the pounding heart of those moments, the pulse of survival that drove your ancestors to innovate under pressure. And yet, even in this primitive technology, there's a beauty, a testament to human adaptability. These early digging tools were not just weapons against nature's wrath. They were symbols of resilience and hope, tangible proof that even the most brutal forces could be challenged by ingenuity. Holding these implements, you become part of that ancient struggle. You feel the connection across time, the shared breath of urgency and determination. These tools remind you that survival often depends on simple things: the right stone, the right technique, and the will to dig deep when the ground itself threatens to swallow you whole. How would you have used these tools if the floodwaters closed in around you? Could your hands move quickly enough, guided by instincts honed over generations? And what lessons might these ancient tools hold for us today, facing new floods and forces of nature? The earth still whispers its secrets, carried in stone and bone. Every tool you grasp is a link to the past, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, human hands can carve out sanctuary if only they dare to dig. If you found yourself racing against rising water, which tool would you choose? And what other forgotten technologies might be waiting beneath the surface, ready to be rediscovered? If this chapter opened a new window into ancient survival, Subscribe for the next installment, where shelter and strategy collide in the face of nature's fury. You step carefully into the shadowed mouth of a shelter carved into the earth, the cool dampness wrapping around you like a protective cloak. It's more than just a hole. It's a fortress against the fury of floodwaters, a carefully crafted refuge where every inch of space fights to keep you alive. You can almost feel the weight of the soil pressing in, not as a threat, but as a shield, holding back the chaos that rages just beyond the earthen walls. This is no accident or haphazard shelter. It is the product of ancient minds wrestling with nature's violent pulse, inventing a sanctuary where none had existed before. As you run your hand along the rough walls, you realize these shelters were built with purpose and principle. They weren't mere pits or depressions, but engineered spaces designed to survive the flood's wrath. The builders understood, instinctively and through experience, the hidden language of water and earth, the way water moves, pools, and pressures surfaces. They created drainage paths to guide floodwaters away, channels that diverted the worst of the deluge, letting the shelter breathe even when the world outside drowned. You imagine those early architects bending low, digging furiously, shaping not just a hole but a system. Walls were reinforced, packed tighter here, layered with stones or woven branches there, to resist the crushing weight of mud and debris. These structures had to be flexible enough to absorb shock but firm enough to hold their shape under relentless pressure. And crucially, air pockets were carved, silent lifelines that ensured breathing space when floodwaters pressed close. This wasn't random or primitive construction. It was a form of hydraulic engineering born not from textbooks but from the urgent, repeated dance with disaster. These early humans had no formal science, yet their shelters reflect an intuitive grasp of forces that would puzzle later engineers for centuries. You see the genius in their solutions, simple, elegant, and brutally effective. But every shelter had its limits. You sense a tension beneath the soil, a question pressing just beneath the surface. How close to the flood could you safely dig before the earth itself became a trap? Dig too shallow or too near to the water's edge, and the shelter would be swallowed in seconds. Too deep or too far, and the shelter lost the protective advantage of natural elevation or structural support. The balance was razor thin, a gamble that meant life or death. You can almost hear the hurried conversations, the shared knowledge passed down around fires. Dig here, not too close. Build walls thick but leave air. Watch the rain and know when to flee. Each shelter tells a story of that delicate negotiation, a testament to survival sharpened by experience and tempered by fear. You step further inside, the darkness enveloping you, but your mind races with newfound respect for these ancient architects. Their shelters weren't just holes, they were living systems, carefully balanced against the flood's chaotic pulse. You realize that every inch of those earth walls was a triumph against nature's relentless power, a monument to human ingenuity under pressure. As you leave the shelter, the flood's distant roar reminds you that safety was never guaranteed, only earned through knowledge, adaptation, and courage. These ancient spaces hold secrets still whispered beneath the soil, lessons in resilience that resonate with the floods of today. If you found yourself digging for survival, How would you balance speed and precision? Could you trust instinct to build a refuge strong enough to hold against the flood's fury? If this glimpse into the architecture of survival reshaped your view of prehistoric ingenuity, subscribe and stay with us for the next chapter, where danger and innovation collide beneath the rising waters. You settle by a flickering fire, the night around you thick with shadows and whispered voices carried across generations. These stories aren't just entertainment, they are lifelines, passed down with care, carrying warnings wrapped in metaphor and mystery. As you listen, you begin to understand that these ancient myths about floods are far more than tales. They are echoes of real events, coded messages from ancestors who faced the same terrors and survived. Each legend is a thread in a vast tapestry of human memory, woven to guide, to warn, and to prepare. Imagine yourself in a prehistoric camp, where elders speak in low tones about a great flood that once swept the land, reshaping valleys and drowning entire villages. The story is vivid, thunderous waters rising without warning, the earth shaking as rivers turned into raging monsters. Yet within these tales lie instructions: how to read the skies, when to flee to higher ground, which rivers to avoid. You begin to sense that folklore was not just about remembering, but about survival itself. Oral traditions acted as a collective memory, a form of knowledge storage far older and more vital than any written text. Before there were books or tablets, human communities relied on these stories to transmit crucial information about the environment, dangers, and how to navigate them. Flood myths, especially, carried layers of practical advice disguised as narrative, lessons encoded in symbolism and metaphor, ensuring that even the youngest or most inexperienced knew what to watch for. You realize these myths also helped communities make sense of chaos and loss. Floods brought destruction beyond the physical. They disrupted lives, shattered hope, and forced entire groups to rethink their relationship with the land. The stories offered comfort, explaining the unexplainable and providing a framework to rebuild after devastation. They transformed trauma into wisdom, turning fear into a tool for future survival. The power of oral tradition lies in its adaptability. As environments shifted and new challenges arose, stories evolved, incorporating new knowledge and experiences. This dynamic memory kept communities connected not only to their past, but to the changing present, constantly refreshing their strategies for dealing with floods and other natural disasters. You wonder about the symbols hidden within these tales: serpents representing rivers, great birds warning of storms, or heroes who escaped the flood by digging deep into the earth. Could these images be prehistoric survival manuals disguised as myth? And what about the places where these stories are told? Are they tied to actual flood shelters, sacred grounds, or landmarks marked by the scars of past waters? The deeper you delve, the more you see that oral traditions are far from primitive relics. They are sophisticated, living archives of human experience, blending memory, emotion, and practical knowledge in ways modern science is only beginning to appreciate. These stories remind you that survival isn't just physical, it's cultural, emotional, and spiritual. As the fire dies down and the night grows colder, you feel the weight of those ancient voices urging you to listen, to remember, and to respect the forces that shaped human history. The flood myths are more than echoes. They are a call to awareness, a reminder that the lessons of the past still resonate beneath the rising waters. If you were there, would you heed the warnings hidden in the stories? Could you discern truth beneath metaphor? Or would the flood catch you unaware like so many before? If this journey into ancient memory stirred your curiosity, subscribe to explore how myth and reality intertwine in the fight for survival. You stand at the edge of a vast floodplain, the land stretching out before you like a living, breathing map carved by water's relentless hand. Here, the earth rises and falls with the tides of ancient rivers, a landscape both nurturing and deadly. You feel the pulse of this hidden world beneath your feet, a world shaped by the ebb and flow of floods that dictated not only where you could live, but how you moved, hunted, and survived. This was no static terrain. It was a shifting mosaic, a challenge and a resource in one. As you trace the contours of the floodplain, you begin to see the invisible lines etched by nature and necessity. The threat of sudden inundation shaped every decision prehistoric humans made. You realize that migration routes were not chosen randomly, but carefully plotted to avoid the most dangerous waters while following paths rich with game and resources. These ancient travelers read the land with an acute awareness, knowing when to move, where to rest, and which areas promised safety during the flood season. The floodplains were paradoxical places. On one hand, they were fertile grounds, lush with plants and animals drawn by the nourishing silt deposits left behind by receding waters. These lands offered abundant food and shelter, making them prime targets for settlement and hunting. On the other, the floodplain was a trap, its rivers prone to sudden surges that could erase entire camps in moments. You can almost hear the whispered warnings passed down through generations, stories of groups caught off guard, swept away by waters that rose like ghosts from the earth itself. This duality forced a constant dance of adaptation. Settlements moved, sometimes seasonally, retreating to higher ground or relocating entirely in response to shifting river channels. Hunting grounds followed the migrations of game, which themselves responded to the flood cycle. You sense the profound resilience required to survive in such a volatile environment, a resilience born from an intimate relationship with the landscape, one where every step was measured and every move calculated. You imagine the ancient eyes scanning horizons, learning the subtle signs of floodwaters gathering, darkening clouds, changes in bird flight, shifts in wind patterns. Geography was their guide, and survival depended on their ability to interpret it. The floodplain was a living classroom, teaching hard lessons through cycles of destruction and renewal. The story of human migration across these watery plains is one of relentless change. People weren't simply fleeing floods. They were navigating a complex system of ecological rhythms, balancing the lure of fertile lands against the danger of drowning waters. You understand that this interplay between geography and survival was not just a backdrop, but the very essence of prehistoric life. As you step back, the floodplain reveals itself as a vast, hidden landscape, a map of endurance etched by water, where every contour tells a story of movement, survival, and adaptation. The waters that threatened to consume also gave life, shaping the paths of your ancestors and the future of humanity itself. If you had to choose your path across this shifting land, where would you go? Could you read the subtle signals of danger and opportunity hidden in the terrain? If this exploration of the floodplain's secret map deepened your understanding of human resilience, subscribe to uncover more stories where survival and landscape intertwine. You press your back against the cool, damp earth of the flood shelter, the low walls pressing in around you like a protective embrace. Around you, the small group murmurs quietly, every breath measured, every movement purposeful. The roar of the approaching flood echoes in the distance, a relentless reminder that survival depends not just on shelter or tools, but on the fragile human bonds holding this fragile refuge together. Here, in this tight space carved from earth and necessity, you witness survival as a collective act, one built on trust, cooperation, and shared sacrifice. In this moment, every hand has a role to play. Someone keeps watch near the entrance, eyes sharp for signs of danger or shifting soil. Another tends to the fire pit, the faint glow offering warmth and light in the damp gloom. You feel the weight of responsibility. This isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about guarding the lives intertwined with yours. Labor is shared, digging, reinforcing, gathering food. All tasks woven into a delicate choreography designed to outlast the flood's fury. Alone, none could withstand the storm. Together, there is strength. But cooperation here runs deeper than physical tasks. The flood shelter becomes a crucible where leadership and trust are forged in fire. Decisions must be swift, yet wise, choosing when to dig deeper, when to abandon shelter, when to comfort the frightened or tend to the injured. You sense the silent agreements that pass between the group, unspoken rules that hold the fragile social fabric intact when the world outside threatens to unravel. In these moments, survival transcends the physical. It becomes a shared emotional endeavor. You imagine the conversations hushed in the darkness, stories of past floods, advice passed from elder to youth, fears voiced and calmed. These exchanges knit the group closer, transforming strangers into kin bound by common purpose. The flood is no longer just a force of nature. It is a catalyst for community, shaping social structures that endure long after the waters recede. This chapter of survival isn't only about escaping disaster, but about building resilience through connection. The tension you feel is real. Every flood carries the risk of loss, but so does the hope that comes from solidarity. You understand that these early human gatherings were the seedbeds of society itself, where cooperation and empathy first proved as vital as stone tools or earthen walls. As the flood's roar grows nearer, you wonder, in the face of overwhelming danger, could you find the courage to lead? Would you trust others enough to rely on them? Survival is not merely an individual act. It is a shared journey through fear and hope. If you were part of this group, how would you balance self-preservation with communal responsibility? Would the bonds forged under pressure be enough to carry you through? If this glimpse into the heart of prehistoric community sparked your curiosity, subscribe and join us for the next chapter, where survival meets innovation in the race against rising waters. You stand at the edge of two ancient, elemental forces, fire and flood, locked in a precarious battle that shaped the fate of early humans. Around you, the warm glow of a flickering flame offers comfort against the cold and dark, a fragile beacon of life in a harsh world. But just beyond the thin walls of your shelter, the earth trembles with the distant roar of floodwaters racing to consume everything in their path. This is the tense world where your ancestors lived, caught between the nurturing power of fire and the destructive force of flood, forced to balance survival on a razor's edge. Fire was more than just warmth or light. It was a lifeline, a tool that transformed raw food into nourishment, warded off predators, and anchored communities through cold nights. The crackle and pop of burning wood became the soundtrack of early human life, the pulse of safety in a wild world. But fire was a double-edged sword. Its heat and smoke could suffocate the very shelter it was meant to protect, especially when that shelter was carved into the earth or nestled in flood-prone valleys. And when the floodwaters surged, fire could be snuffed out in an instant, leaving you vulnerable to cold, darkness, and despair. Imagine yourself crouching in a shallow pit dug into damp soil, the walls around you packed tight with earth and stone. The air is thick with the scent of smoke, mingled with the musty dampness of the ground beneath. The fire burns low but steady, tended carefully with sticks and dried leaves chosen for their slow-burning qualities. You can't simply build a fire as you please here. Every spark is a risk, every plume of smoke a possible suffocation hazard in this enclosed space. The challenge is clear: how to keep the flame alive without letting it consume your fragile refuge or poison the air you breathe. This was the reality early humans faced as they learned to combine fire and flood survival. They developed ingenious strategies to protect both. Hearths were dug into clay-lined floors to contain heat and prevent accidental spread. Stones were placed around embers to shield them from sudden water seepage and to reflect heat efficiently. Smoke holes, small, carefully positioned openings, vented toxic fumes without letting rain or floodwater rush in. These architectural details weren't random. They reveal a deep, intuitive knowledge of how fire behaved under varying conditions, long before any written science. The tension between fire and flood influenced not just the physical construction of shelters, but the very rhythms of daily life. You would have to be constantly alert, watching the skies for sudden storms, feeling the ground for vibrations signaling rising waters. At the same time, the fire needed regular attention, adding fuel at just the right moments to keep it burning steadily, without overwhelming the space with smoke or heat. It was a delicate balancing act, one demanding constant vigilance and a profound respect for the forces around you. Social life revolved around these fires. They were gathering points where stories were told, knowledge shared, and bonds forged. Yet the looming threat of floods meant these moments were often underscored by anxiety. Conversations were sometimes cut short by the urgent call to reinforce walls, move belongings higher, or prepare for a quick escape. The fire's warmth was both comfort and reminder, a fragile line between life and the chaos beyond. You sense how this duality shaped early human psychology. The unpredictability of floods, striking suddenly and with overwhelming force, instilled a deep-seated fear of water's power. At the same time, fire was revered not just as a tool but almost as a living entity, fragile, precious and vital. The need to maintain fire in the face of flood threats created a culture of respect and caution, influencing everything from social rituals to survival strategies. This struggle also sparked technological innovation. Early humans experimented with fireproof materials, learning which stones could withstand heat and water without cracking or breaking. They developed methods to dry and store fuel safely, ensuring supplies even when floods made gathering impossible. Tools adapted to the dual demands, from stone knives for preparing firewood to digging implements that could reinforce shelters or divert water. These adaptations reveal a profound intelligence born of necessity. Fire management wasn't a simple skill, but a sophisticated practice requiring knowledge of weather patterns, materials, and the behavior of both fire and water. You begin to see early humans not just as survivors, but as inventors and strategists, shaping their world to meet elemental challenges head-on. But the balance was fragile. Floodwaters could rise faster than anyone expected, dousing flames and filling shelters with cold darkness. In those moments, the very things that sustained life, fire and earth, could become death traps. You imagine the desperate decisions. Do you abandon the shelter, risking exposure, or stay and try to rekindle the flame amid rising waters? Each choice carried peril, demanding courage and quick thinking. You understand now that the story of floods and fire is not just about physical survival, but about mastering fear, adapting traditions, and forging resilience. It's a story of tension and harmony, destruction and creation, where every ember carried the hope of life, and every flood reminded humans of their fragile place in nature. If you were living then, could you manage this precarious balance? Could you keep the fire burning through the flood's roar, finding warmth and light in the darkest hour? If this story of elemental survival sparked your imagination, subscribe and join us for the next chapter, where we explore how ancient humans turned danger into innovation beneath the shifting waters. You stand on the edge of a rushing river, the sky darkening with heavy clouds that rumble like distant drums. The air tastes of impending storm, but you don't just sense danger. You've learned to read the signs. Long before modern technology, before rain gauges or sirens, ancient humans faced the threat of flash floods with nothing but their instincts and a deep understanding of the natural world. Did they develop their own early warning systems to survive? The question lingers like the scent of wet earth before a deluge. Your eyes scan the horizon. The first sign might not be the sky, but the animals around you, the birds suddenly silent, the herd's restless movements, the anxious calls of small creatures scurrying to higher ground. These subtle changes are more than coincidence. They are nature's own alarm signals. Prehistoric humans lived closely intertwined with the rhythms of the wild, attuned to nuances that escape most modern senses. This chapter invites you to step into their world, where survival hinged on observing and decoding these signals before the floodwaters surged. You begin to realize that early humans likely became keen naturalists, experts in animal behavior as much as weather. Migratory patterns, sudden changes in flock formations, or even the peculiar stillness of the earth could all hint at an approaching flood. But how did these observations turn into actionable warnings? Was it just individual intuition, Or did communities develop shared knowledge, perhaps rituals or coded signals, that acted as flood alarms? Imagine a gathering where elders interpret the sky's hues and the birds' calls, passing down this vital wisdom to younger members. Oral traditions may have preserved these early warning signs as stories or chants, embedding survival strategies deep into cultural memory. These tales were not mere myths but practical guides, warnings wrapped in narrative to prepare communities for disaster. You also consider whether humans used more direct signals, a form of primitive communication designed to alert groups quickly. Could sound play a role? Perhaps beating on hollow logs, mimicking thunder, or other rhythmic noises served as alarms. The repetition of specific sounds might have created an early acoustic warning system, transcending language but uniting a tribe in urgent readiness. Yet the natural world was unpredictable. No warning system, no matter how finely tuned, could guarantee safety. Flash floods could strike with terrifying speed, overwhelming even the most vigilant. But the effort to anticipate disaster reveals a powerful truth. Early humans were not passive victims of nature. They actively sought control, weaving observation, experience, and ritual into a tapestry of resilience. This evolving intelligence marks a profound shift, from reacting to threats to anticipating them, from isolation to communal preparedness. You see how early flood warnings may have fostered stronger social bonds, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Surviving the flood became a collective challenge, demanding communication and trust. You might ask yourself, could such ancient warning systems be the ancestors of modern flood alerts? What wisdom from the past still flows beneath today's technology? And if you were part of that early world, would you trust the calls of birds and the colors of clouds more than any device? As the storm breaks, the distant rumble turning into a roar, you feel the urgency and fragility of early survival. Every second counted, every signal mattered. This is the story of how humans learned not just to endure floods, but to foresee them, a testament to adaptation, intuition, and the relentless pursuit of life. If the idea of ancient flood warnings reshaped your understanding of survival, subscribe to journey deeper into the mysteries of prehistoric resilience. You step back in time, standing at the cusp of millennia, watching as the simplest marks in the earth transform into intricate shelters carved and built to withstand the onslaught of floods. At first, there were mere shallow pits, crude hollows scraped hastily into the ground, places to crouch and hide when the sky darkened and the river swelled. But these humble refuges tell a story of beginnings, the first tentative experiments in bending nature's forces to human will. As you move forward along this timeline, the shelters grow more elaborate, shaped by the relentless pressure of repeated floods. What began as instinctive digging soon blossomed into intentional design. Walls were raised higher and reinforced with stones and hardened clay. Drainage channels appeared, cleverly guiding water away from the most vulnerable spaces. Roofs, at first simple coverings of branches or animal hides, became sturdier, sometimes even partially subterranean, anchoring the shelter firmly in place. You sense the evolution not as a leap, but as a gradual dance between humans and their environment, each flood teaching painful lessons that molded shelter construction. You imagine early builders sharing knowledge, stories of successful designs and deadly failures passed down through generations. Innovation spread slowly but surely, carried by migration, trade, and human curiosity. Across vast landscapes, from flood plains to mountainous valleys, diverse communities adapted these ideas to local materials and challenges. A shelter in one region might use densely packed reeds to repel water. Another might rely on timber frameworks to withstand debris flow. Yet beneath these differences lies a common thread, a persistent human refusal to be swept away. This progression was not only about structural strength, but also about making these refuges livable. Air pockets were designed to maintain breathable space even when floodwaters pressed against the walls. Entrances were positioned to prevent water ingress, but allow quick escape. Some shelters developed multiple chambers, creating safe zones within safe zones, reflecting a growing sophistication in both architecture and social organization. You can almost hear the whispered conversations of ancient architects debating the best layouts, testing new ideas by firelight. But the battle against floods was never fully won. Each new design had limits, and the unpredictability of nature meant constant adaptation. When a flood exceeded expectations, shelters failed and communities paid the price. Yet, with every collapse came renewed determination to innovate, to learn from the land and the waters that threatened them. You come to see flood shelter design as a story of human persistence, a slow, steady siege against the elements. It's a testament to survival instinct combined with creativity and cooperation. Through trial, error, and ingenuity, early humans transformed vulnerable holes in the earth into fortified havens, laying groundwork for the architectural knowledge that centuries later would inspire cities and civilizations. As you trace this evolution, you realize that these ancient shelters were not merely structures but symbols of hope. They embody the enduring human spirit, a will to protect, to adapt, and to endure even when the waters rise higher and faster than ever before. If you were living through those millennia of change, would you have been one of the inventors shaping the shelter of tomorrow, or a cautious guardian of traditions, passing on the lessons of flood and survival? The answer lies buried beneath layers of earth and memory, waiting to be uncovered. If this journey through the evolution of flood shelters changed how you see human ingenuity, subscribe to keep exploring the depths of our shared past. You stand at the edge of a rushing river, watching the water swell with terrifying speed. Beneath your feet, the earth trembles, and somewhere in your chest, a deep, instinctual fear stirs. A fear older than language, older than civilization itself. This fear is not just a fleeting emotion. It is the silent architect of survival. It shapes your choices, sharpens your senses, and compels you to act. In the shadow of relentless floods, your ancestors lived in a world where fear was a constant companion, guiding their every move and teaching them the brutal lesson that survival was never guaranteed. Imagine the weight of that fear pressing down through countless generations. It was not just about escaping the immediate rush of water. It was about living with the ever-present uncertainty that the next flood could arrive without warning, wiping away homes, food stores, and loved ones. This was a trauma carved into the very fabric of early human existence. The river was a source of life, yet also a capricious destroyer, turning fertile plains into watery graves. How did they manage this psychological tension? The pull between dependence on nature and dread of its fury. You begin to realize that fear, while paralyzing in some moments, became a powerful catalyst for adaptation. It sharpened awareness, tuned instincts, and forged social bonds grounded in mutual protection. Early humans learned not just to survive floods physically, but to internalize their threat, transforming fear into foresight. Memory became a survival tool, with stories, warnings, and rituals encoding lessons about floods in ways that transcended generations. Oral traditions preserved the scars of past disasters, ensuring that each community carried the collective knowledge of what to avoid and how to prepare. This psychological adaptation was not a simple process. It involved managing trauma and anxiety in a time without modern coping mechanisms. Imagine living through repeated floods, each one threatening your existence, yet finding the strength to rebuild, dig deeper, and strategize anew. The human mind displayed remarkable resilience, balancing caution with hope. This delicate emotional landscape shaped behaviors that were both practical and deeply emotional, rituals to honor the forces of nature, communal acts of rebuilding, and a shared determination to persist against all odds. You see how this mental evolution is as crucial as the physical one. Fear wasn't just an obstacle, it was an evolutionary force shaping how humans learned, communicated, and innovated. The mind became a flood shelter itself, a space where trauma was held, processed, and transformed into strategies for survival. This intertwining of emotion and action reveals the profound depth behind what might otherwise seem like mere instinct. As you consider the psychological toll of living under the constant threat of floods, you confront a timeless question. How do you today face the unknown and the uncontrollable? Would you find the courage to adapt as your ancestors did, turning fear into a guiding light rather than a paralyzing shadow? Their story invites you to reflect on your own resilience in the face of uncertainty. This chapter is a reminder that survival is never only about physical strength or tools, but about the inner workings of the human spirit, how fear can forge bonds, memory can protect, and adaptation can arise from the depths of vulnerability. It's a testament to the complexity of human nature and the profound psychological legacy left by those who first dug into the earth to escape the flood's deadly embrace. If this exploration of fear and survival shifted your perspective, subscribe and journey with us as we continue to uncover the depths of human endurance. You carry within you a story written not only in history but in the very fabric of your being. Beneath the surface of your skin, embedded deep within your cells, is DNA, the blueprint that connects you to every human who ever lived. But what if this blueprint holds more than just the record of your ancestry? What if it bears the echoes of ancient floods, violent torrents that shaped not only where your ancestors lived but who they became? This isn't just a question for scientists. It's an invitation for you to consider how survival itself may have sculpted the human genome. As you peer into the microscopic world of genetics, Emerging research suggests that environmental pressures, floods among them, left lasting marks on human evolution. These marks aren't visible scars but subtle shifts, adaptations woven into your DNA across countless generations. Imagine traits like heightened senses, an acute awareness of approaching storms, or the sudden change in air and ground vibrations that might have given some early humans a crucial edge. These weren't mere accidents of biology, but responses honed by necessity, shaped by the relentless demand to detect danger before it struck. You might wonder, how could a flood, a temporary disaster, influence something as fundamental as your genes? The answer lies in the power of natural selection. In prehistoric times, those who survived floods were more likely to pass on their genes to the next generation. Traits that enhanced survival, whether sharper hearing, quicker reflexes, or improved social cooperation, became more common over time. Your ancestors' encounters with floods were, in a sense, evolutionary tests, filtering and refining the human species. The story deepens as you explore how social behaviors might also have genetic roots tied to flood survival. The coordination needed to build shelters, the communication required to warn others, and the communal efforts to rebuild after devastation all hint at innate tendencies toward cooperation. Some scientists argue that floods helped catalyze the evolution of empathy and teamwork, traits encoded within your DNA as survival strategies. These behaviors weren't just cultural. They may have been written into the biological code that guides human interaction. But the connection between floods and genetics isn't just about physical or social traits. It also touches on cognitive functions, the rapid decision-making and problem-solving skills essential when seconds count. Imagine your brain's capacity to assess risk, weigh options, and act decisively being influenced by the legacy of ancient flood threats. This possibility challenges how you think about intelligence itself, suggesting it evolved not just for abstract reasoning, but as a life-saving tool in a world of unpredictable dangers. This chapter invites you to reflect on the profound ways your body and mind may carry the imprint of those early struggles against nature's fury. Every instinct, every reaction could be traced back to a flood that roared through a prehistoric valley, demanding adaptation or death. It's a humbling thought that your survival today is linked to an ancient dance with water and earth, a relationship written deep within your genes. Yet this is an ongoing scientific journey. The field of epigenetics, which studies how environmental factors influence gene expression, hints that the story is even more complex. Perhaps the experience of floods not only shaped DNA over millennia, but also left marks on how genes activate and respond within a single lifetime. This opens new questions. Could the trauma and adaptation of our ancestors continue to influence how your body and mind react to stress today? If the idea that floods helped shape you at the most fundamental level changes how you see yourself, consider what other ancient forces might be coded into your DNA, waiting to be uncovered. This narrative is a reminder that survival is written not only in history books but within you, in the mysterious language of life itself. If this glimpse into your genetic past sparked new questions about human evolution, subscribe and join us as we continue to unravel the mysteries of our ancient origins. You stand on the edge of a modern floodplain, watching water surge over concrete barriers, swallowing streets and homes alike. Despite our technology, satellite alerts, and engineering marvels, flash floods still arrive with a force that can upend lives in an instant. The question lingers: what can the ancient humans who faced these same elemental challenges teach us today? Their story is not just a tale of survival long past. It is a guidepost, whispering secrets about resilience and adaptation in the face of nature's relentless fury. Long before the invention of weather forecasts or levees, your ancestors confronted the same terrifying rush of water, the same uncertainty about where the flood would strike and how to survive it. They had no sirens, no drones to warn them, only their senses, their instincts, and their intimate knowledge of the land. You begin to realize that the wisdom embedded in their survival strategies still holds relevance, perhaps more urgently now, as climate change intensifies flood risks worldwide. What stands out is their profound connection to the environment. Ancient humans didn't just live alongside rivers and floodplains. They read the subtle signs, changes in wind, shifts in animal behavior, the way the clouds gathered on the horizon. They interpreted these cues not as random events but as messages from the earth, prompting action and preparation. Today, in our rush toward technological solutions, there is a risk we forget this deep attunement to nature. The ancient way reminds you that survival is as much about observation and respect as it is about gadgets and infrastructure. Their shelters, dug deep into the earth, engineered with drainage channels and air pockets, were more than primitive refuges. They were expressions of adaptive ingenuity, designed with a keen understanding of hydraulic forces long before formal science existed. This ancient architecture teaches us that resilience lies in simplicity and harmony with natural systems. Modern flood defenses might do well to embrace these principles, blending technology with ecological wisdom to create solutions that work with, not against, the land. But beyond physical structures, the social lessons are striking. In the face of floodwaters, communities pooled their knowledge, skills, and strength. Survival was never an individual act but a collective effort. Today, as urban centers grow and flood risks multiply, this communal spirit becomes essential once again. How can we rebuild social networks and shared responsibilities to face the challenges ahead? The ancient human's legacy suggests that cooperation is not just a moral ideal, but a practical necessity for enduring disaster. You also consider the psychological resilience forged through millennia of flood encounters. The ability to endure trauma, rebuild after loss, and adapt to an uncertain world is a mental heritage passed down through generations. This inner strength may be the most vital lesson of all, reminding you that human survival is as much about mindset as it is about material resources. In today's world, where floods can cause displacement, anxiety, and loss on a massive scale, cultivating this resilience is crucial. Modern scientists are beginning to explore how ancient flood survival can inform current disaster preparedness. From indigenous knowledge systems to archaeological insights, these echoes from the past offer valuable perspectives often overlooked by contemporary planning. You might ask, are we listening closely enough to the lessons etched in earth and memory? Could the future of flood resilience depend on blending ancient wisdom with modern innovation? As you reflect on these connections, a clear message emerges. Floods are not merely natural disasters to be conquered, but complex challenges requiring humility, respect, and adaptability. Your ancestors' survival was never guaranteed. It was earned through constant vigilance and learning. That struggle continues today, and their story invites you to join a lineage of resilience that stretches back thousands of years. So, what will you take from this ancient legacy? Will you see floods as insurmountable threats, or as forces that can teach us new ways to live with uncertainty? The answers you find may shape how humanity faces its most urgent environmental challenges in the decades to come. If this journey through past and present reshaped how you think about floods and survival, subscribe and stay with us as we explore more hidden chapters of human resilience. You step cautiously alongside a team of archaeologists, the air thick with anticipation and dust. Beneath your feet lies a landscape long forgotten, layers of earth concealing secrets that have slept for millennia. As shovels scrape and brushes sweep away centuries of sediment, you begin to witness a resurrection. Ancient flood shelters emerging from the soil, silent witnesses to human ingenuity in the face of nature's fiercest assaults. Each newly uncovered space is more than just a hole in the ground. It is a testament to the relentless spirit of survival, a story carved into earth itself. These recent discoveries challenge everything you thought you knew about prehistoric flood survival. Once dismissed as mere caves or temporary refuges, these shelters now reveal sophisticated designs that speak to a deep understanding of flooding's threats. You see evidence of carefully constructed drainage channels, walls reinforced with stone and packed earth, and air pockets left deliberately open to sustain life underground. The very geometry of these spaces tells a story of adaptation honed over generations, proof that early humans were not passive victims of floods, but active engineers shaping their environment for protection. Each artifact uncovered, the chipped flint tool, the fragment of a woven basket, the charred remains of a hearth, adds layers of meaning to this unfolding narrative. You feel the weight of fear and hope mingling in the hands that fashioned these objects. These were the tools and comforts of survival, crafted in the shadow of an ever-present danger. Every find is a bridge across time, connecting you to ancestors whose lives revolved around the urgent need to dig, defend, and endure. The sediments themselves tell a parallel story. Layers of silt and mud trapped beneath the shelters mark the very floods that these refuges were built to withstand. By studying these layers, scientists reconstruct the rhythm of ancient floods, when they came, how devastating they were, and how often people returned to the same sites to seek safety. You realize the shelters were not one-time escapes but central to a cycle of survival, rebuilt and reinforced after each watery assault. In some cases, the shelters reveal traces of communal living. Shared spaces hint at cooperation between families or clans, underscoring the social dimension of flood survival. It was not just individual ingenuity that saved lives, but the collective will to adapt and protect. This challenges modern assumptions about prehistoric isolation, suggesting a more complex web of human relationships grounded in shared hardship. The thrill of these discoveries is tempered by the fragile nature of what remains. Floods that buried these shelters also erased countless others, leaving only fragments for archaeologists to piece together. Each excavation is a race against time, a delicate negotiation with erosion, modern development, and natural decay. You sense the urgency driving researchers to document and preserve this buried history before it vanishes completely. Beyond the scientific revelations, the uncovering of these shelters invites a deeper reflection on human resilience. The repeated act of digging into danger, of creating safe havens beneath floodwaters, speaks to an enduring courage and creativity. These shelters were lifeboats carved from earth and willpower, standing as monuments to a primal determination to survive against overwhelming odds. As the latest layers are peeled back, new questions emerge. How widespread were these shelters? Did similar structures exist in other flood-prone regions around the world? And what untold stories remain hidden beneath the soil, waiting for another team, another moment to bring them to light? This chapter of human history is far from complete, and you are part of the unfolding journey. If the story of these lost flood shelters stirred your curiosity and sense of wonder, subscribe to uncover more hidden chapters of human survival and ingenuity. You close your eyes and let your mind travel across vast landscapes, from the towering mountains of Asia to the sprawling savannas of Africa and the dense jungles and open plains of the Americas. Each place carries a unique story of ancient humans facing the fury of flash floods, those sudden, unpredictable torrents that could erase lives and livelihoods in moments. Yet, as you journey through time and space, a remarkable pattern emerges. Despite cultural differences and geographic divides, humanity's response to flood threats shares deep, universal threads. In the river valleys of ancient China, you imagine communities who built raised platforms and dug intricate drainage systems to channel floodwaters away from their homes. Their shelters, often semi-subterranean, show a sophisticated blend of natural materials and clever engineering designed to balance safety and comfort. Here, the flood was not just a threat, but a force intertwined with the rhythms of life. Its arrival anticipated and woven into seasonal cycles of planting and harvest. Thousands of miles away, across the deserts and wetlands of Africa, another ancient people faced a different but no less brutal challenge. Here, the flood pulses were erratic and fierce, washing over dry riverbeds and low-lying plains. Early humans in these regions created refuges in rocky outcrops or dug deep pits lined with branches and mud, fortifying them against the sudden swell of water. You sense a fierce intimacy with the land, a survival strategy honed through countless generations of observation and adaptation. Turning westward to the Americas, you encounter early societies along the mighty Mississippi and Amazon rivers. These groups constructed mounds and earthen terraces not only to defend against floods, but to assert community identity and spiritual connection to water. Flood survival here was as much about social cohesion as physical protection, a shared ritual of resilience that reinforced bonds and ensured knowledge passed from elders to youth. What connects these diverse stories is a fundamental human instinct to carve out safety in a world governed by unpredictable, often violent forces. Digging, building, observing. These were universal responses, born from the same urgent need to live another day. You realize that across continents, survival was never about domination over nature, but a dialogue with it, a continuous negotiation between risk and refuge. The materials may have varied: bamboo and clay in Asia, stone and earth in Africa, timber and soil in the Americas. But the principles were strikingly similar. Shelters were designed to deflect water, allow for ventilation, and withstand pressure, revealing an intuitive grasp of hydraulics and engineering long before written records. This shared knowledge underscores a remarkable human continuity, creativity forged in adversity. You also sense the psychological echoes threading through these cultures. Flood myths and oral traditions served as living libraries of survival wisdom, encoding lessons about timing, danger signs, and communal response. These narratives became more than stories. They were lifelines, guiding decisions and shaping identities. Despite the vast distances, the flood was a universal teacher, compelling humans to adapt not only physically but culturally and spiritually. As your mental journey concludes, a question lingers. How did these ancient strategies influence modern flood management across the globe? Are the age-old principles of observation, adaptation, and community still at the heart of how we confront flood threats today? The global flood survival story reminds you that while technology advances, the foundation of resilience remains rooted in ancient human experiences. In this tapestry of survival, you see reflected the unyielding human spirit, a mosaic of ingenuity, courage, and connection spanning the continents and millennia. It is a story that belongs to all of us, reminding you that wherever you live, the legacy of flood survival flows through your veins. If this journey through ancient flood survival across cultures inspired you, subscribe for more explorations of humanity's shared history and resilience. You take a deep breath as you prepare to descend once again into the ancient earth, stepping back into the world of your cavemen ancestors, their hands raw and determined, their minds sharpened by the unforgiving threat of flash floods. What began as a desperate act of digging to escape the sudden, violent rush of water became something far greater than survival. It was the seed of human ingenuity, a silent revolution beneath the soil that would ripple forward through time, shaping architecture, community, and the very essence of human innovation. Imagine the first handful of dirt scooped away, the rough-edged shelter beginning to take form. No grand blueprints, only instinct, necessity, and an intimate knowledge of the Earth's textures and moods. These earliest shelters were more than temporary refuges. They were the first whispers of design, the initial blueprints that would one day evolve into the towering cities and sprawling civilizations you see today. The cavemen's fight against floods carved out more than safety. They carved a space where the human spirit could flourish, protected from chaos, yet deeply connected to the unpredictable world outside. You feel the pulse of that legacy beneath your feet, the architecture of survival that would inspire generations to build not just with stone and wood, but with vision. These shelters taught lessons in balance and resilience, how to let water pass without destruction, how to breathe beneath the surface, how to endure when the world above was swallowed by a storm. This intimate knowledge passed down through countless hands, from one generation to the next, became a cornerstone of community life, anchoring social bonds in shared struggle and cooperation. The digging wasn't merely physical labor. It was a profound act of communication with the environment, a dialogue between humans and the earth that demanded respect, patience, and adaptability. From this conversation grew more than shelters. It grew the very idea that humans could shape their surroundings rather than be shaped by them. The flood shelters are the ancient ancestors of modern architecture, engineering, and urban planning, echoing in every foundation laid and every wall raised. But the legacy goes beyond stone and soil. It lives in your genes, in the way you respond to danger and uncertainty, in the stories passed down through millennia about weather, survival, and hope. The psychological imprint of those early floods, the fear, the resilience, the communal determination, resonates within you still. It is a reminder that survival is not just a physical condition but a mental and emotional journey, a dance between vulnerability and strength. As you trace the arc from those first shelters to today's cities, you see how the primal act of digging into danger has evolved into a global story of human endurance. The cavemen's shelters were the first chapter in a never-ending book, a narrative of adaptation that continues in the face of rising waters and changing climates. Each new flood is a reminder that beneath the surface of modern life lies an ancient pulse, a shared heritage of struggle and survival. Now, as you rise from the earth, the quiet power of these buried shelters lingers. They are monuments not of stone or metal, but of human spirit, enduring, inventive, and profoundly hopeful. In their shadows, you carry the legacy forward, part of a continuum that stretches back to the very beginning of human resilience. The earth holds its secrets tightly, but it also whispers truths that shape who you are. And as long as floods will come, and they will, the story of digging into danger will continue, waiting for the next chapter of human endurance to be written. If this journey into the heart of human survival touched you, subscribe and join me for the next exploration into our shared past and future.